Patch 11 brought with it a series of big buffs to the Revolver, turning what was once a joke weapon into a unique and powerful gun that is strong on each class that has access to it. So what's the point of the Revolver? The biggest strengths of the Revolver are its high damage per shot, crit and weak spot multipliers, and target penetration. These make it very good at removing specials and most elites, especially when they're bunched up together. This is combined with a near instant draw to ADS and shoot speed, making it very versatile. It's also one of the few guns that is decent at killing carapace. It's got damage drop off at range, but you can ignore this in most scenarios, as most breakpoints have some leeway in that regard, and most of Darktide's fights take place in close quarters anyway. Know that if you failed to one-tap a drag shooter, you either shot him in the arm or he was too far away. The power of the Revolver comes at a cost, as it's got some pretty harsh downsides. Its ammo pool is among the smallest in the game. It has roughly 24,000 total damage at 80 ammo, with only shotguns being weaker. Its cylinder also only holds 5 shots. This is especially important when factoring in Darktide's absolutely horrendous hit registration. Getting a single ghost hit means wasting 20% of a fully loaded cylinder. In spite of its small cylinder, the Revolver has one of the slowest reloads in the game. It's also the only weapon with a proper tactical reload. Used shells are ejected, and new rounds are inserted one at a time. Ironically, it also doesn't have any stages in its reload, and only remembers how many rounds were put in. Anytime you stop a reload, you're gonna have to start the entire animation again. This has the advantage of letting you cancel out of a reload to immediately fire if you have any ammo in your cylinder. The pistol whip weapon special may seem useless, or even detrimental, as it pushes things to the side instead of knocking them away from you. Do not try to knock back bursters with it. This actually lets you turn bulwarks around by bashing them, which is occasionally useful and always funny, but remember, pressing it stops you from swapping to your melee weapon for the duration. On the topic of bulwarks, the unyielding damage of the Revolver is pretty good, but is reliant on getting headshots, and especially crit headshots. It's not going to nuke bosses, and isn't particularly ammo efficient, but can help bringing them down in a pinch. The Revolver shoots a big raycast, which makes it easier to land headshots compared to other weapons. The Revolver is one of the few weapons in the game that benefit from investing in crit chance. A perfect critical bonus roll gives you 21% crit chance. All classes have a baseline of 5% crit chance except for Veteran, who gets 10. Crit chance stacks additively. You can test this by equipping a Revolver with Surgical 4, Crucian 4, and Deadshot, which can give you a guaranteed crit. Crits are also especially important to deal with mutants as efficiently as possible, since the Revolver suffers from the same inconsistency in mutant DPS as the Hellbores do. Crits are also just generally helpful against many targets. The strongest blessings for the Revolver are those that synergize with crit chance, but most blessings are relatively weak in comparison to must-pick options on other weapons. Surgical and Crucian Roulette make for a great blessing combo, since crit chance stacks additively. You get a lot of value out of doubling up on crit chance blessings, and those two are by far the best. Crucian Roulette's weakness of doing nothing for your first shot on a full cylinder is offset by most combat situations requiring more than one shot, especially mutants, and situations where you're only partially reloading your Revolver to shoot a single critical target. Surgical also somewhat compensates for that weakness, while also giving extra value to follow-up shots when equipped with Crucian Roulette. Point Blank can't quite compete with the other two crit chance blessings, as its activation condition is too restrictive. It's a very situational blessing, only getting any value if you are actively meleeing a horde when something that needs shooting shows up. It's effectively a dead blessing most of the time, but at least the Revolver has the draw speed to use it. Speed load is really good, although it doesn't directly increase your damage output like Crucian Roulette or Surgical, it compensates for one of the Revolver's worst problems, and effectively increases your DPS by minimizing downtime. It's especially valuable on Zealot and Psyker, since they don't have any way to increase their reload speed, but also has a place in some veteran builds. Assuming you slide a lot, it's never a dead blessing. Sustained Fire is a more consistent way to get extra damage than crits, but for a much smaller payoff. Locking it isn't terrible, but you won't get as much value out of it as you would by going all in on crit blessings. It's not great, but it's not terrible either. Glory Hunter is very situational. 25% toughness on elite kill is nice in theory, but only gets any value if you're missing toughness with elites to kill. Veteran would get the most out of it thanks to unwavering focus, but confirmed kill makes it redundant, with the added benefit of also working on specials. Zealot doesn't get much value from it thanks to his ability to get toughness on demand with Purge the Wicked and amplify it with Faith Restored. Psyker's weak toughness economy could make Glory Hunter desirable, but his only source of toughness damage reduction gets worse the longer you keep the Revolver in your hand, making the toughness gained less valuable over time. More importantly, the prototypical situation where Glory Hunter would shine is while fighting shooters. On paper, you'd be killing the lesser enemies and then pop the gunners or shotgunners for a quick toughness boost to stay in the fight. The issue with that is that the inherent playstyle of the Revolver doesn't benefit from that, mostly due to the small cylinder. If by the time you've used all 5 shots the shooters haven't all died to collateral, the toughness gained won't be enough to protect you for a reload. Glory Hunter or not, you're better off ducking back to cover to reload. Except for Veteran, who gets to face tank shots but doesn't need Glory Hunter to do so. It's way too situational and doesn't even do that much at the best of times. Terrifying Barrage is worthless. Suppression in general isn't worth going for, and it's especially useless when it suppresses things around you and not around the target you've killed. Trick Shooter sounds nice, but its activation condition makes it hard to recommend. Power is good, but there are very few situations where you're gonna be landing successive headshots and getting to use that power boost against a meaningful target. You now have 1 second to get your next headshot. This is better than it was, but the chain time is still restrictive. Hand cannon, when used as it was intended, isn't good. The Revolver doesn't benefit from rending, especially not with critical hits, and the only 2 targets it can even in theory help with are Crushers and Maulers. But it's currently bugged and applies to your melee weapon, which is funny. I mentioned earlier that crit chance stacked additively and that you should build your Revolver to maximize it. Logically, that should go double for Veteran, right? Well, no. One-shotting trappers in the head is the most important breakpoint you can aim for on Revolver, and an absolutely god-rolled Revolver barely misses it with 25 Maniac. Going with damage against Maniacs and either damage against Specialists or weak spot damage will give it to you, although you need a near perfect roll for weak spot to work. Specialists is also more useful overall. Outside of that, the Veteran gets to make the most of the Revolver in more ways than one. He gets to invest in both crit chance and reload speed, and even gets to bypass reloading entirely. Reload speed feats are fantastic for the Revolver, especially when coupled with speed load. There is a catch, however, and taking both of them means giving up on Deadshot, which is also great for the Revolver, and synergizes beautifully with Crucian Roulette and Surgical. With this in mind, there are 2 main ways to build for a Revolver on Veteran. One that goes all in on reload speed, and one that goes all in on crit chance. Of course, there's nothing wrong with not going all in on one or the other. They serve more as a general guideline than hard set rules. The reload speed build takes both tactical reload and one after another, and can opt for speed load on top of that. With that much reload speed, you'll have no problem maintaining counterfire for extended periods of time. The crit build replaces one after another with Deadshot, and counterfire with sustained fire. This won't let you keep volley fire up as well as counterfire, since you don't want to prematurely activate it so you get the most out of the full reload, but the toughness boost can come in clutch in some situations, and bypassing reloading entirely is great for those moments where you need 10 shots and you need them now. Here are some reload speed comparisons to let you decide which feat and blessing combo you want to run. When it comes to boss damage, the Revolver isn't exactly the tool for the job. Choosing the bigger they are means giving up either counterfire or sustained fire, who are both much more useful outside of boss killing. The bigger they are does make your gun way more efficient at killing bosses, getting you about as much damage with 5 shots as you would deal with 10 shots using sustained fire. Losing sustained fire or counterfire hurts, but for something like monster specialists, it's definitely worth considering. For the purposes of slamming bosses, the bigger they are takes about half as many shots as sustained fire does to deal about the same damage. Also, dunking on Ogrins is always funny. The Revolver is great at removing specials or elites, especially under pressure, but a good veteran gun also has to be able to take on shooters. And this is where the Revolver's performance can vary wildly. If you get the drop on a bunched up patrol, nothing beats it. Are they all in cover spread out around a room? It's slow and ammo inefficient. Overall, the Revolver makes for a great gun on veteran, able to quickly react to any threat and take it down, though it suffers in some high intensity situations and ammo economy can cause some problems. The Revolver makes for a fantastic gun on zealot. Quick to pull out and very mobile, the penetration will let you soften up range patrols and react to specials even through density. An instant swap to a gun that will 1 or 2 tap most specialists is very useful for a class that spends most of its time in the middle of the action. Zealot doesn't really have much in the way of build options for the Revolver. You either take Emperor's Executioner or you don't, and I recommend you do. One-tapping trappers with a single perk is fantastic, and passively getting more gun damage is always good. Rising Conviction will also increase your range damage, but it's a situational buff that requires melee hits if you want to boost your gun, whereas Emperor's Executioner is permanently active and completely reliable without any effort. This free range damage increase frees up your second perk for crit chance or something else. The Revolver also helps the Thunderhammer by providing mobility and can even get you breathing room in hordes or quickly delete packs of bruisers, but please don't go dumping into every horde you see. Or do it, but where your team can't see you. Gun Psyker gets a lot of flack from the weak-minded blunts who populate this game. The number one dumb thing you'll hear thrown around is that a Gun Psyker steals ammo from the team. This doesn't make sense, as everybody else is bringing a gun. Are Zealots, who have less in the way of raw damage boosts than Psyker for ranged, also stealing ammo? The game doesn't have a dedicated Psyker slot, so it's not like you're adding a 4th gun user where there would only be 3 normally. The other thing you hear a lot is that there is no point in bringing a gun on Psyker full stop. This is equally stupid, as Auto Pistol and Elise is one of the strongest builds in the entire game. But even without the cheese gun, Gun Psyker performs quite well. If a gun is good, it doesn't suddenly become weaker when placed into a Psyker's hands. It actually gets beefier. Warp Unleashed and Warp Chargers passively buff your damage in a big way, much like Emperor's Executioner that lets you one-tap Trapper in the head just with a Maniac perk. Outside of raw damage, Psyker's Kit synergizes very well with guns. Brain Burst lets you conserve ammo when needed, or when using a gun with weak carapace damage, and opens up bulwarks to blast them in the head. You also have access to one of the dumbest weapons in the entire game, coupled with ammo-free Horde Clear and Ascendant Blaze. And you're going to want Ascendant Blaze. Kinetic Barrage doesn't add anything to a gun build. There are few elites you need to Brain Burst if you have made a remotely sensible gun choice. Choosing between Kinetic Flare or Warp Battery is going to depend on what you want. Kinetic Flare will occasionally help your Revolver turn 2-shot kills into 1-taps, as well as helping with mutants. It also helps maintain warp charges without active management. This lets you take Psykinetic's Aura so you can spam your baby blazes. You could also take Cerebral Lacerations depending on the modifiers. 25% extra damage for the whole team on monstrous specialists comes in handy. Kinetic Flare comes with the downside of a weaker Ascendant Blaze. Luckily, you have the option of using the dumbest melee weapon in the game with Slaughterer. Even without guaranteeing kills, staggering and chunking a patrol or a horde is far from useless. Infinite Cleave AoE damage never goes to waste. Warp Battery takes away your funny random head explosions and makes it more difficult to keep warp charges up. The payoff is a much stronger Ascendant Blaze, which can be buffed even more by using the dumb weapon. If you don't mind more intensive warp charge management, Psykinetic's Aura is still a strong pick. Otherwise, Psychic Communion is a real lifesaver. The biggest weakness of Psyker is his toughness economy, and there are 2 options to mitigate it, depending on build and playstyle preference. Essence Harvest is the way to go when playing without the silly sword and with a weaker Ascendant Blaze. It's a more consistent way to get toughness, assuming there are things you can kill with a brain burst. Warp absorption is excellent if you're running the silly sword, and if you've got a big boy Ascendant Blaze. Enemies killed by the dot count as killed by a warp attack. You can also take this with a weaker Ascendant Blaze if you know you can guarantee kills with it, like by using a Slaughterer sword, or by actively damaging your targets before or while they're burning. Groaners will die to a 4-stack Ascendant Blaze no matter what. For the 4th row, you can pick between the two good ones. Mind in Motion is useless. Kinetic Deflection is very strong, letting you revive under melee pressure that would block break any other class, and makes kiting Chaos spawns much easier. Kinetic Shield compensates for your biggest weakness, but maintaining peril with a gun build can be annoying, especially if you're not running the silly sword. The Revolver in Darktide is in a great place. It isn't overwhelmingly overpowered like the Bolter or the Autopistol, but is a strong, range-independent armor-piercing damage option with great handling. Its agility and versatility are unmatched, and there is no situation where a Revolver would be a bad pick. More importantly, the Revolver isn't just strong, it's also very fun, with no other gun in the game fulfilling the fantasy of blasting a big iron at the bad guys. I'd like to thank Crab for helping with the script. You probably don't know who he is, but you should thank him for his service. He's cool. If you'd like to see more of this kind of stuff, feel free to subscribe. I also stream Darktide on Twitch and upload full runs daily.